What Lisa Weiss just revealed changes everything. For years, the public believed Dougweiss and Joanie Lamb were walking examples of faith and unity. But behind the stage lights and polished smiles, a much darker truth was brewing. In an exclusive moment no one expected, Lisa drops a bombshell so explosive it threatens to unravel their entire legacy. Secrets, lies, betrayal. It's all coming out now, and once you hear it, there's no going back. Are you ready for the truth they tried to bury? To the outside world, Doug and Lisa Weiss looked like the perfect Christian couple. They were the image of love, strength, and unity, especially in the spotlight. Doug was known as a marriage expert, a counselor who helped countless couples fix what was broken. Lisa was always by his side, smiling, supportive, the picture of grace and faithfulness. They had been married for over 30 years. People looked at them and thought, "That's what I want in my marriage." But as Lisa later revealed, what people saw was only the surface. Behind the smiles and sermons, things were falling apart, slowly, quietly, painfully. There wasn't one explosive moment that shattered everything. It wasn't some huge betrayal or dramatic fight. It was silence, distance, the kind of emotional drifting that sneaks up on you over time. Lisa started to feel like she was living with a stranger. Doug wasn't present anymore. Not in the way that mattered. He was busy, always busy. Speaking engagements, ministry work, books, interviews. His face was everywhere. His voice echoed in churches and conferences. But at home, he was fading. Lisa found herself sitting at the dinner table alone more often than not. The man who had once held her hand during hard times now barely looked up from his phone. Lisa tried to convince herself it was just a phase, that the pressure of ministry was temporary, that he'd come back around. But weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. She wasn't angry at first. She was confused, hurt. She kept asking herself what she had done wrong, why things felt so off when everything looked so perfect from the outside. It didn't help that Doug was still preaching about healthy relationships, about the importance of communication and emotional connection, while Lisa felt more invisible than ever. She tried to bring it up, quietly, gently, but the conversations never went anywhere. Doug always had an explanation, a reason he was tired, distracted, or unavailable. Lisa started to feel like she was the only one trying, and the more she tried, the more she felt alone. Eventually, she stopped talking about it. She stopped hoping he'd notice. She just learned how to live in the silence, how to smile for the cameras while her heart quietly broke. It wasn't just about being physically alone. It was about feeling emotionally abandoned. She was grieving a marriage that technically still existed, but only on paper. And the hardest part was pretending like everything was fine. They were public figures. They had an image to protect. Doug couldn't afford for people to see cracks in their foundation, not when his entire career was based on helping others fix theirs. So Lisa played the part. She showed up, she stood beside him, she kept the mask on.
Joanie Lamb called me. The biggest shock to me when Joni called me, she wasn't the Joni off television. She was fit to be tied. She was angry. She was even upset that I would say nice things about her son because she said, "Jonathan is trying to kill me." And I said, "He's trying to kill you." And she said, "He's destroying the company. He's destroying us. He's destroying me." And I said, "No, Joni, something very bad has happened. And there's been an essay and all of this." "Oh, no." And then she defended Pete. He's hurt Pete so much. The Pete that Rebecca and JW wrote a huge letter about, that Pete. The Pete that Rebecca and JW won't let into their home, that Pete is a good guy. She said that Susie was a pathological liar and that she had made these accusations against a very nice man, the chiropractor, who is deceased now, but has a record and attacked her. So I was in shock what Joni was saying to me. I implored her. I said, "Please reconcile with Jonathan for yourself. That would be the hope." I saw that side of her. I can only say it's nothing like the Joni on television. It's nothing like that sweet person. But I did see that person somewhat in the video where she was talking about Jonathan has been conducting a smear campaign. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I hadn't seen Jonathan conducting a smear campaign. I'd seen Jonathan in turmoil.
But inside, she was falling apart. She missed her husband, the man he used to be. She missed the connection, the laughter, the partnership. Now, he was always on a stage or in a meeting or preparing for the next big thing. And Lisa? She was at home, quietly watching her marriage unravel while the world praised the man she felt like she was losing more every day. Then came the divorce. After years of trying, Lisa finally realized that she couldn't keep pretending. The damage was done, and the saddest part? There wasn't a single villain in the story. Just two people who had drifted so far apart that they couldn't find their way back. When Doug remarried only months later, the shock was more than Lisa could handle. The man who had once stood on stage talking about loyalty and faith had moved on so quickly, it made her question everything they had shared. Lisa's story isn't about bitterness, it's about truth. It's about how even the most perfect marriages can fall apart behind closed doors. And it's a reminder that sometimes, the biggest heartbreak isn't loud. It's quiet, slow, and unseen by everyone except the one living through it. Nobody in the faith community saw it coming. Not like this. Doug Weiss, the well-known Christian counselor and marriage expert, had just finalized his divorce from Lisa Weiss, his wife of over 30 years. The ink was barely dry. People assumed he'd take time to heal, to reflect, to process the end of a decades-long relationship. But then, almost out of nowhere, came the announcement that left everyone speechless. Doug Weiss had remarried. And not just to anyone, but to Joanie Lamb. Joanie Lamb, the widow of Marcus Lamb and co-founder of Daystar Television Network, was a respected figure in Christian media. She had also recently walked through the valley of grief after losing her husband. For many, Joanie was a symbol of strength and grace. So when news broke that Doug and Joanie were now husband and wife, it wasn't just surprising, it was explosive. It happened fast, too fast, according to many. Whispers turned to rumors, and rumors turned to online debates. People wanted to know, how could someone like Doug, who built his career teaching about patience, healing, and restoration in marriage, remarry so quickly after ending a 30-year commitment? It felt like a contradiction, like something was off. Even Lisa Weiss, Doug's ex-wife, seemed blindsided. She had spent her entire adult life supporting Doug, raising their family, and standing by his side through ministry and success. And now she was watching from the sidelines as her ex-husband walked into a new chapter without her. So soon, so suddenly, and so publicly. The pain of their divorce was still fresh, and now she had to process this new reality under the harsh light of public scrutiny. Many in the church community felt a sense of betrayal, not because Doug found love again, but because of how quickly it happened. People were confused. Was this marriage about healing and companionship, or was there more going on behind the scenes than anyone had realized? Some began to ask uncomfortable questions. Had Doug and Joanie developed feelings for each other while he was still married to Lisa? Were there signs of a growing closeness that had been hidden from the public eye? Had grief brought them together in a way that blurred boundaries too soon? The timing didn't sit right with many. There hadn't been much time between Doug's divorce and the new wedding. It raised eyebrows not just because of how it looked, but because of what it implied. If Doug truly believed in the principles he taught, long-term commitment, slow healing, careful discernment, then how did this whirlwind remarriage fit into that picture? The backlash was swift. Christian forums lit up with discussions. Some defended Doug and Joanie, saying that life is short, that love after loss is a blessing, and that no one should judge what they hadn't lived through. Others were harsher, accusing them of hypocrisy and questioning their integrity. Church leaders found themselves fielding questions from their congregations. Was it okay to remarry so fast? Should someone in ministry lead by example when it comes to personal matters? Was there a double standard for public figures in the church? The media didn't hold back either. Headlines used words like shock, scandal, and betrayal. Commentators weighed in. Former supporters went silent. And through it all, Doug and Joanie remained mostly quiet, offering little explanation, allowing the speculation to grow. But for Lisa, the silence was loud. It echoed through the life she used to share with Doug. She wasn't angry, at least not in the way people expected. She was hurt, deeply. And what made it worse was how quickly she was replaced, not just privately, but publicly, in the eyes of the faith community. People forget that divorce isn't just about the end of a marriage. It's about the loss of shared dreams, the collapse of a history you built with someone. And when the person you shared that history with moves on fast, really fast, it feels like your story is being erased. like your love never mattered. Lisa had stood in Doug's shadow for years, supporting his rise, protecting his image, and sacrificing her own needs for the sake of their ministry. And now, she was left picking up the pieces while the world turned its attention to Doug's new beginning. Julia Weston, the soundswoman, wrote a piece called Outer Space in 2000. Some people questioned whether this remarriage had been in motion before the divorce was even finalized. There was no proof, but the speed raised suspicions. It felt like a door had been opened long before the previous one had fully closed. And when people started connecting the dots, shared conferences, public appearances, mutual friends, it only added fuel to the fire. But this wasn't just about two people falling in love again. It was about how their love story challenged everything people thought they understood about faith, timing, and integrity. It forced people to confront the uncomfortable truth. Even the most trusted leaders are human, and even in ministry, things aren't always what they seem. For Doug and Joni, the whirlwind remarriage became a defining moment, not just for their relationship, but for how they would be remembered in the eyes of the public. It changed the way people saw them. For some, it strengthened their empathy. For others, it shattered their trust. And for Lisa, it was a painful reminder that even in the world of faith, even when you give your all, people can move on without you, and fast. In the end, the whirlwind remarriage didn't just shock the faith community. It exposed deeper questions about image, authenticity, and what it really means to live out your values when no one is watching. Because sometimes, the speed of a new beginning says more about the pain of the ending than anyone's willing to admit. For years, Lisa Weiss kept her pain private. She wore the smile. She played the part. In the public eye, she was the devoted wife of Doug Weiss, the man known for helping couples heal, the one who preached about marriage, loyalty, and faith. People saw them together at events, heard them speak on Christian shows, watched them hold hands on stage like the perfect team. But behind that picture-perfect image was a quiet pain growing inside Lisa, and it only got louder when the cameras stopped rolling. What most people didn't see was how lonely she had become. How, over time, Doug's focus shifted from their home, from their relationship, to his ministry and growing platform. He was constantly traveling, speaking, writing, counseling strangers about how to save their marriages, and yet, the one marriage that should have mattered most, his own, was slowly falling apart. Lisa didn't speak up, not at first. She thought it was just a phase, that he'd come back to her, that they'd reconnect. But weeks turned into months, months turned into years, and the silence between them became suffocating. She didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to admit it, not to herself, not to anyone. So she stayed quiet. She smiled in public and cried in private. She told herself this was what being a good Christian wife looked like: sacrifice, endurance, hope. But then came the divorce. And that quiet pain, her private heartbreak, was no longer something she could hide. It became public, fast. And just when she was beginning to process the loss of a 30-year marriage, the news hit like a punch to the gut. Doug had remarried. Already, to Joanie Lamb. Lisa could barely breathe when she saw it. It felt surreal. Was this really happening? The man she had spent her life with, built a family, a ministry, a future, was now publicly celebrating a new beginning with someone else. So soon, too soon. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Friends, family, reporters, everyone had questions, but Lisa had no answers. She was still trying to understand it herself. And just like that, the private pain she had carried for so long exploded into full-blown public chaos. Her name was everywhere. Her marriage, her divorce, her heartbreak. All of it was now a headline, a conversation, a topic of debate. People wanted to know what had happened. When had things gone wrong? Was Doug really the man he claimed to be? Had Joni been in the picture before the divorce? Was Lisa bitter? Was she broken? The questions kept coming, and no one cared whether she was ready to answer them. She tried to stay quiet. She didn't want to fight. She didn't want drama. But the pressure kept building. The story was out of her hands, and the world had already decided who the characters were in this unfolding drama. Doug and Joni were the new power couple, rising from their personal losses into something beautiful. Lisa, meanwhile, was painted as the forgotten first chapter, the woman left behind. It hurt, not just because of the marriage ending, but because of how quickly her life was being rewritten without her input. The love story she had helped build was now being erased in real time, replaced with something shinier, newer, more inspiring. But Lisa knew the truth. She knew the long nights, the cold silences, the missed anniversaries, the phone calls that went unanswered, the way Doug had slowly slipped away, right in front of her, while the world called him a marriage expert. And now, here she was, dealing with the collapse of everything she had known, and doing it under the spotlight. What made it worse were the people who took sides. Some said she was bitter, that she should move on. Others blamed her, asking what she must have done wrong to make Doug leave. There was little compassion, little understanding for the quiet suffering she had endured for years. They wanted scandal, they wanted drama, and if she didn't give it to them, they created it themselves. Lisa didn't want revenge. She didn't want attention. She wanted peace, but peace doesn't come easy when the world is watching you bleed and calling it entertainment. So she spoke up, not with rage, not with hatred, but with honesty. In an interview, she shared her side, her truth. She talked about the emotional abandonment, the loneliness, the confusion of watching her marriage slowly die while being told to pray harder. She didn't bash Doug. She didn't attack Joni. She simply told the truth. And that truth shook everything. Suddenly, people saw her differently. Not as the ex-wife in the background, but as a real woman with real pain. A woman who had been silenced by expectations and roles for too long. Her voice cracked through the noise, and what had started as a storm of chaos slowly began to shift into something else. Understanding. Lisa's private pain was out there now, yes, but so was her strength. The way she carried herself with grace in the middle of a firestorm. The way she chose vulnerability over bitterness. The way she stood up, not just for herself, but for every person who's ever felt unseen in a relationship. She didn't ask for this spotlight, but once it found her, she used it to shed light on the truth, on the messy, painful, human side of marriage that no one wants to talk about in church. She reminded people that heartbreak doesn't discriminate, even among the faithful, that even perfect marriages can be broken underneath, and that silence only protects the image, not the people. Lisa's story became more than gossip. It became a mirror, a wake-up call, a reminder that real love, real commitment, real healing, they don't happen in the spotlight. They happen in the quiet choices we make when no one's watching. So yes, her private pain became public chaos. But from that chaos came clarity and strength, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of a new chapter she never saw coming. Not because she wanted it, but because she earned it. For years, people looked up to Doug Weiss. To them, he was a man of wisdom, someone who could talk about love, commitment, and marriage with authority. He didn't just teach these things, he lived them, or so it seemed. His books were read by couples in crisis. His sermons were shared across churches. His voice became one of the most trusted in Christian marriage counseling. And then, everything changed. When news broke that Doug had divorced his wife of over 30 years and remarried Joanie Lamb just months later, the shockwaves didn't just shake Lisa Weiss. They shook the entire Christian community. How could this happen? How could a man who built his life on preaching about sacred marriage, loyalty, and God's plan turn around and move on so quickly? People had questions, and not just small ones. This wasn't just about one man and one woman anymore. This was about the church, about the image so many of us believe in, about the example we hold up to the world. Was it all fake? Were we buying into a polished image that was never real to begin with? To many, it felt like betrayal, not just of Lisa, but of every person who had ever turned to Doug for guidance. His brand had always been about saving marriages, about staying through the hard stuff, about being faithful. But his actions told a different story. And that's what hurt the most. It's not that people expected him to be perfect. No one is. But they expected him to be honest. They expected him to live out the same truth he was preaching. And now, with this quick remarriage to Joanie Lamb, another prominent Christian figure, it started to feel like the church was dealing with yet another case of do as I say, not as I do. Was this hypocrisy, or was it something more? For some, this moment became a breaking point. They'd seen too many Christian leaders fall, too many scandals, too many private sins becoming public disasters. So Doug's story didn't just upset them, it exhausted them. It was yet another reminder that the church sometimes puts more effort into appearances than accountability. More focus on stage lights than inner healing, but others saw it differently. They believed maybe, just maybe, this could be a wake-up call. Not just about Doug Weiss, but about the system that allowed someone like him to rise so high without ever being questioned, about the kind of culture that rewards charisma over character, and how dangerous it is to build a ministry on one person's personality instead of God's presence. Lisa Weiss's voice, when she finally spoke out, wasn't loud or angry. It was tired. It was real. She wasn't trying to destroy anyone. She was just telling the truth. Her truth. And when people listened, many realized they'd been ignoring stories like hers for far too long. It raised the question, how many other perfect marriages were falling apart behind the scenes? How many other women like Lisa were being silenced, overlooked, forgotten? How many men like Doug were being praised on the platform while quietly checking out at home? The answers weren't easy to face, but they were necessary, because this isn't just about one failed marriage. It's about how we as a faith community sometimes choose to protect images instead of people. It's about how we sweep things under the rug to avoid scandal, even when that silence is hurting real families. And it's about how we define leadership in the church. Are we looking for men and women of true integrity? Or just people who can speak well and look good on camera? Doug's quick remarriage didn't just stir up gossip. It sparked real conversations, deep ones, painful ones. Some churches were forced to ask hard questions. Some believers re-examined the voices they had trusted. Others felt angry, like the church had let them down again. And honestly, maybe it had. But maybe that's exactly what needed to happen. Maybe the mask had to come off. Because if there's anything we can take from this, it's that we cannot afford to keep pretending. We can't keep lifting up role models just because they sound right on Sunday mornings. We have to start asking what's going on Monday through Saturday. We have to stop making gods out of pastors and remember that they are human too, flawed, vulnerable, and in need of grace just like the rest of us. That doesn't mean we excuse bad behavior. It doesn't mean we ignore the hurt caused, but it does mean we stop living in denial. Lisa's story opened a lot of eyes, and not because it was loud or messy, but because it was honest, raw, painful, and so many people saw themselves in her. People who had stayed silent, people who had been told to keep the peace, people who had been made to feel like their pain didn't matter as long as the ministry image looked strong. So now here we are, with the truth out in the open. Doug's story has left a mark. Some will call it scandal, some will call it hypocrisy, but maybe, just maybe, it's an invitation. An invitation to get real, to build something better, something more honest, more humble, more grounded in truth even when it's messy, because maybe the church doesn't need more perfect images. Maybe it needs more people who are willing to stop pretending. If this moment has shown us anything, it's that appearances fade, images break, but truth? Truth remains. And if we want to grow, if we want to really reflect the love and grace of Jesus, we have to start by telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it shatters what we thought we knew. This isn't just Doug's legacy anymore. It's a mirror, and what we do next, how we respond, could be the difference between another cycle of silence or the beginning of something real.